Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the November listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. We have a general listening session today from 1 to 2:30, and this Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And then we'll hold the final regular business meeting of 2021 for the council on Friday at 1 p.m. We encourage you all to attend the council meeting Friday to engage directly with the council members. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the homeland of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's session. First, we are recording this listening session, and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. The recording and summary notes will be available on the CTHC landing page and the blog when they're ready. And the recordings are also uploaded onto the YouTube as well. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you haven't already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name and let us know who you are. And as we get into the discussion portion of today's session, we would appreciate if those that are comfortable could get on camera. We're going to start with brief introductions of those of you who have joined us, and then as always, we'll dive into a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on the recent updates, and then we'll go into the listening session and discussion portion of today's convening. If you'd like to speak at any point, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can also just unmute your line as it makes sense. And if you're using the Zoom app and you want to raise your hand, it is the app controls are Alt-Y in Windows or Option Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. And if you've dialed in and you're muted, you can unmute your line by pressing *6. You can also email written comments at any time to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. Now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing mindset. Many of us doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for us, to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us. And now I'm going to hand it over very quickly to Councilmember Lucas. If you'd like to introduce yourself and say a few words, or you can just say you don't want to and you want to observe, and that's fine too.
No, I'm happy to say good afternoon and wish everybody well. It's a beautiful time of the year. I'm reminded that Thanksgiving is coming up soon. I don't know how many folks take a moment to truly appreciate that day and its essence and the gift of life that we have. So happy to be here. I'm anxious to hear what folks have to say, and I wish you all well.
Thank you, Council Member. I'm now going to have staff introduce themselves. Loretta, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Loretta Miranda. I'm Chief Deputy Tribal Advisor and Special Counsel for the Governor's Office. I am a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians and happy to be here.
And then Michael Park from our office is on as well, and you can directly message him if you have anything you'd like to follow up with us on or with the council members as well. And it looks like we have Council Member Harper just joined. I won't put her on the spot, but she just waved to all of you. And if you'd like to speak, you can unmute your line at this time too. Okay. And then if anybody else who's joined us would like to introduce themselves to the group and say a few words, you can do so at this time. Oh, and I see Councilmember Fisk is on as well, if she'd like to introduce herself to the group.
Yeah, this is Colleen Sisk, and I'm Winnemem Wintu from Northern California by Mount Shasta. And I look forward to hearing from the group that's going to be sharing, and hopefully we move something forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, council member. So if anyone else would like to introduce themselves to the group at this time, you can go ahead and do so. If there's anything that you wanted to make sure that you said and you might not be on the whole time, there's not a lot of rules around how we do this. So invite you to introduce yourself to the group and say a few words if you'd like to do so at this time before we get into the update. And you can also use the chat if you're less comfortable sharing with the group. And you can put your introduction in the chat, or you can also send anything directly to me or Loretta or Michael, and we can follow up with your comment as well.
Hi, can you hear me? I'll go. Hi, thank you. My name is Madonna Feather Cruz. I'm tuning in from Santa Rosa, California, Outreach Director, Native American Liaison, and Outreach Coordinator at Disability Services and Legal Center. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for joining. If anyone else would like to introduce themselves to the group at this time, feel free to. Okay. One other thing I wanted to point folks to is that the feds have had some updates over the past day, and we'll probably have some more updates tomorrow in their Tribal Nations Summit that they have redone for the first time, or re-upped for the first time in 4 years. So let me actually get that for all of you linked to, because you can watch it via YouTube. And I will put it in the chat right now because day one is already uploaded. There are a few initiatives that they are working on, and I think for this group, it'll be particularly interested in following, and hopefully that's the right link. If it's not, let me know so that you don't end up watching something that's not the thing that you're supposed to watch. But they did announce some major investments in language revitalization, in the boarding school initiative, in violence against Indigenous peoples, including Missing and Murdered and Violence Against Women's Act initiatives, and then also more cross collaboration on all fronts on tribal affairs. And there's some more specifics there. But I encourage you all to take a look and see what folks are saying. There's some particularly interesting conversations with some of the secretaries and directors at the federal level, where they are saying things that I've never heard feds say before. So and it's all recorded, so you can call them on it later. But so very much encourage all of you to go take a look. Okay, so with that, I am going to do our updates and share my screen. And is that the right one, Loretta?
It's the presenter view one.
Every time. I was worried that I wouldn't have you today and then I'd just be in presenter view the whole time. So let me switch my display. Okay. And that's the right view.
Now it's perfect.
Okay, great. So as always, we're going to go over the council meeting principles. So in order to create a space where participants feel welcomed, respected, and able to speak comfortably, the council will uphold the following principles in all convenings. We ask that all participants, which includes council members, authorized representatives, staff, moderators, and the public, work towards sharing in their stewardship. If you are a participant in a convening with the council, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome. Take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and seek support as you need it. Respectful engagement means to affirm the person, but critique the ideas. Provide feedback constructively and with the intent for mutual growth and healing. Welcome feedback and challenges to your opinions. Avoid contributing to assumptions or generalizations about tribes, tribal communities, or other groups. Do not ask individuals to speak for their perceived group. Speak only for yourself. Offer participants the benefit of the doubt. Spirited discussions are expected on these topics. See this as a sign that folks are engaged and care, and remember to be respectful as you speak, read, and listen. Honor confidentiality. Do not share others' experiences or information without permission. Assume that you have relative privileges and both explicit and implicit biases. Know that others may or may not have had similar opportunities, experiences, and background as you. Recognize that their contributions are equally valuable. For those from dominant identity groups, refrain from contributions that prioritize dominant experiences over those who have been marginalized. Welcoming behavior means making behavioral adjustments for virtual communication. If you want to say something to someone's face, please refrain from saying it virtually by voice or text. Know that use of strong language, and I apologize, the train's going by, so I'm going to mute myself for just a moment. Okay. It wanted to make sure that I very much knew it was there. So it's gone by, now I can continue. Know that use of strong language, capital letters, and exclamation marks can easily be misinterpreted online as unwelcome yelling or aggressive behavior. Remember that tone does not carry via text. People might not realize you're joking or being sarcastic. Leave space for others to engage and express comments and ideas if you have already spoken recently, by letting people finish their thoughts before adding new ones. Personal well-being. Take steps to ensure your physical comfort. Some examples in virtual meetings include shifting your sitting and standing position often, taking a purposeful deep breath regularly, raising your eyes to look beyond the screen, or sit back from the computer when possible to relieve eye strain. Keep a glass of water nearby and take sips throughout sessions. Please consider physically leaving the computer during breaks. Participate as you are able to and adjust your presence as needed, whether that's turning the video off or stepping away entirely. It's not expected that all participants will or should be present for the entirety of the Council's work. We know and support that you will take time to eat, take care of your families and pets, but be aware that virtual convenings will be recorded and available to the public. Set up supportive resources such as food, water, ergonomics, and privacy while offloading responsibilities if possible in advance of convening. Plan for breaks and stick to them. Seek support from your own networks or from provided resources as needed. And please alert Council staff to any concerns as soon as possible. Really, we're trying to create a space where people feel comfortable and trust the process. And so we just want to make sure that if you're seeing anything, that you say something so that we can address it as soon as possible. And seek support. We recognize that participants bring their entire selves and histories with them to the Council, and that topics explored during the course of this work may stimulate emotions and thoughts that would benefit from accompaniment and support. Although trauma responses can come from a variety of sources and contexts, the Council understands that those who have experienced disparate treatment due to their Native identities may specifically want to seek assistance related to historical trauma and related issues discussed with the Council. Council staff will be providing supportive resources for participants to be available for the duration of the Council's work. Okay, so for today, we're going to talk again about the overview of the Council and its charge, the November Council meeting agenda. We're going to go through some of the subcommittees and get feedback as we go. And then we're going to go through an overview of what we're looking at in planning for regional meetings and the first regional meeting that we're hoping to stand up. And then we'll open up to general listening and discussion. But we'll pause at certain points and just kind of open it up to general discussion. So if you have a thought at any point, feel free to unmute your line and jump in, or feel free to enter a comment into the chat or a question. So what is the Truth and Healing Council? It's a council made up of representatives from California Native American tribes charged with bearing witness to, recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state and California Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. So again, the council itself, it is a receiver of these narratives. It's records the documentation and examines existing documentation of, but is not dictating what those narratives are, what the story is, what that historical relationship is. And this is really the council of the entire California Native community. And so what the council itself, the 12 or 16 member council does is create the frame around everything, have the high level directives of where to go with the council, and that's all informed by tribal consultation. So the council itself is not charged with doing research. It's not charged with creating that narrative. It's not charged with doing all of the groundwork for that. It's really charged with being a receiver of those testimonials, being a receiver of those narratives, and then shaping the final outcome report or outcome database or outcome deliverable in a way that reflects the community based on what it's received. The council will submit a final written report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. And this timeline could change just because we have seen some constraints on the council's ability to do its work and on our ability to do our work from the governor's office just because of COVID. And the reality that this kind of work is sometimes best done in person. But the final report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state, and may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration, and consider how to prevent similar depredations and policies in the future. And that second piece, the recommendations, are really that deliverables piece, where if there are ideas about how to do better or how to attempt to make up for what was lost, those deliverables, the council will be thinking about and shaping as informed by tribal consultation and community engagement throughout the whole duration of the council. So if you have ideas about what can be done now, the council is collecting those and considering those as they come in, so that those can go into kind of a final, into the final report. And where it makes sense to start working on things now, the council can consider that as well. One thing that is helpful to look at is the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation they have a number of reports, but they have one that is just a number of recommendations based on the work of the council. And that's kind of a similar type of thing that this council would look at, is, topically divided, but also very particular recommendations about things that the state can do and that even the general public can do to attempt to repair relations and restore native peoples to native places. So the council structure, it's organized under a charter, and it's made up of voting members and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions, with 1 seat for a non-federally recognized designee in each region. But again, the council members are not representative of the regions. This structure is just to ensure that there is regional diversity and diversity of tribal representatives. Well, I shouldn't say representatives if they're not representatives, but of voices. That's probably a better term. And then each region has an alternate voting member to ensure quorum for action. We have several members who are also seated elected officials for their tribes. And so we tried to make it as flexible as possible to ensure that the council, where it needed to act, could move quickly, but that it wasn't all acting in any way that would be slated towards one region or one experience or the other. The Council welcomes and encourages all available methods for public participation. Participants are encouraged to attend and observe all meetings of the Council, submit written statements to the Council, make oral statements and testimony to the Council, participate in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, host and organize affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the Council, and join the work of the subcommittees. If you're a California Native American tribe, we're seeking to begin initial consultation meetings. So if you'd like to reach out to us, you can do so, but we'll also be reaching out to you to schedule those meetings. And these initial tribal consultation meetings are really thinking through how you want to engage with the Council and what your needs might be as we move forward. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, and meetings will be recorded and transcribed. Tribes can share as much or as little as they're comfortable with. And those are for the official, like, tribal consultations that we're doing under this charge. So these initial meetings will not be recorded. They'll just be kind of a touch. We'll be touching base with you to see how you want, if and how you want to engage. And then outside of tribal consultation, we're also available to meet with individuals, organizations, and groups that request. There's one more meeting for 2021, and that is this Friday. And then in December, we'll still have the listening sessions, and we may actually have some targeted listening sessions as well, or work groups. But the meetings for the full Council, the next time they'll meet will likely be in January after the holidays. And that will be probably more of like a virtual business meeting while we kind of gear up for hopefully a hybrid or an in-person meeting later in March. So for November, we'll have the welcome, the roll call, and the traditional opening. And as always, if there's anyone from the community that would like to do the traditional opening, please just reach out to Michael. You can direct message him now, or you can email us at the info@catruthandhealing.com. And we can get you credentials so that you can do that opening. And then we'll have approval of the minutes for August and September. We'll then have any Council member updates from the last month. And then we'll go through the regular meeting structure, location, and topics. And we brought that up in the agenda just so that we could talk to the general community and the Council about what we're looking at for that regular structure for the next year. And then also if there were proposed locations outside of that first meeting that we might want to talk about. The regular meeting structure under the charter is a quarterly meeting structure in March, June, September, and December. And that's what will take place starting next year. And it will rotate throughout the state. So the first meeting that we're looking at, we're going to host in Sacramento, just because that's going to be, number one, a good launching point for this kind of work, where there's a lot of resources in the area that we can link people to. But that also, and there's a lot of opportunities for affiliate events in the area as well. But that also, we have a bit more ability to do hybrid and kind of know the deal here. So we're fully planning on having in person if possible, but that will depend on public health situation in Sacramento and in California generally, because we don't want to put our community at risk unnecessarily if we can just, again, add more time to the work of this Council just to allow for that, understanding though that we do want to get the work underway. And that some of the most critical pieces of this are going to be the in-person talking circle healing spaces. So for that, for the first meeting, we're planning on hosting it in Sacramento. Day one, we're hoping to bring together this Council, the California Indian Heritage Center Task Force, which is made up of tribal leaders throughout the state and representatives throughout the state. And then also the Native American Heritage Commission, and have that be, which that is going to get challenging if they have quorum too. So they actually may need to agendize that as well if they attend, and it has anything to do with their body of work. But we'll work through those issues. And We are planning to have day one. We already talked to the Parks Department at that future site of the Indian Heritage Center. You know, hopefully if weather allows, because that's an outdoor space and it's where the governor gave his apology and kind of kicked off this work. And so we're hoping to anchor this work there again. And then day two, we're thinking of different locations. So if folks have ideas, I think we'd prefer something that is COVID friendly. So somewhere that is not super cold, but is potentially outdoors. But we have been looking at other indoor locations, but that'll just put probably more constraints on how people can attend, depending on the public health situation at that time. That said, we are also looking at regional planning committees. So if there's anyone who wants to help with the planning of a Sacramento meeting, let us know. And then the next meeting will be in the northern region. So if there's anyone who's thinking about wanting to plan something in their region, just let us know and we can start having those conversations. Again, they're more of work groups. So if you you know, are from the northern region and you'd like to weigh in on where the first meeting for that region should be, we would love to chat with you. Again, I think for the first year, we're going to want to try to find locations that are COVID friendly, just so that we're not putting people at risk unnecessarily. But again, please let us know. And then what we've talked about is potentially having hearings in between the regular meetings so that we can get to more places in the region. Because if we are, even if the council went for like several years, there's, you know, it's going to be challenging to get everywhere. And so we are going to propose having intermediate hearings in different locations in the region. So for example, if we have our Eastern meeting in Sacramento, we could have an intermediate meeting in somewhere else in the Eastern region. So for example, we could go to, you know, Bishop and meet in like the Paiute-Shoshone area, which is a completely different region. We could go to Tuolumne, we could go to the Yokuts area. And so there's a couple of different, there's like vast differences in history of the locations. And so we want to make sure that we're not underrepresenting different regions, and we are allowing different tribes to and different Native peoples to weigh in on the issues that are important to their area. So that was a very long overview of subject or topic 6. We'll then go through subcommittee updates and community input, and this is really where we want to hear a lot from the community about what you want to see from these different subcommittees. So I know we had someone who had called in to give a comment on education and was disappointed because we didn't end up getting to it in the last meeting. So we pulled that one up. We've also pulled up the deliverables subcommittee so that we can give an update on that and let people know really what that group is going to be doing. And then we've also pulled up a couple of the other subcommittees to give updates on what they're thinking about and also get feedback. So we'll go through all of that. For the funding partnerships, I'm going to give a more detailed look at what that looks like so that everybody's on the same page, because I think that there's a little bit of misconceptions about where we're at on that, and want to make sure that everybody is comfortable. And then we'll go into a discussion on public statements on current issues for the council. And then we will give an update on the consultation request and timeline for responses and go into the next meeting date and topics. Again, the next meeting date and topics will likely be in January. And that will be a business meeting that's virtual probably, but then, you know, we'll also have a chat about potentially laying out the meeting dates for the next year, just so that we have those on calendar and we can start planning those bigger convenings. We'll then have public comment, and typically we'll start public comment at 3 p.m., but given that we're trying to do more public comment within the subcommittee updates and community input, we may just get to public comment once everything else is done. but we don't want to have no public comment. So if we get to probably like 3:40 and we haven't gotten to public comment, we'll probably call it at that moment and then allow for public comment. And then I think for this meeting, we will emphasize that if you have given, we will emphasize that to stick to the topic that you're giving public comment on. And if you've given public comment already, that we would ask that, you know, you defer to people who haven't yet given public comment so that we get to everybody. Just because we want to make sure that everyone's getting that opportunity and that we're hearing a diversity of voices in these meetings, since these are the only times that the council meets as a full panel. So again, on the timeline, we're working with the council and the subcommittees to finalize state and third-party contracts, provide training and tools for the council and the public to participate in the process, and developing a draft strategic planning document, draft additional policies and procedures, and build out subcommittee work and work product, and develop communications and web-based materials. And so a lot of this is in process right now. So we don't have major updates, but we'll probably have a lot of that stuff kind of teed up for the January meeting for everybody to view, and anything that's draft that needs to be finalized by the council will be ready by January. And then in 2022, subject to COVID-19 constraints, the council will begin its regular quarterly meetings. And again, as I mentioned before, we'll continue to have monthly listening sessions that are virtual, even if we go into a more hybrid space where we're doing more you know, opportunities for folks to meet in person, which we're not quite there yet in terms of the public health, the world around public health in California, and where things are going with the Delta variant and boosters and vaccination rates. But if we do shift into a more in-person space, we will continue to have these opportunities to weigh in virtually as well. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's anyone who has any public or any comments or anything they'd like to share with the group before we go into some of the other updates. And I see there's some stuff in the chat. Loretta's added some Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, and that's the document I was mentioning where there's different calls to action on what can be done that have specific policy changes that need to happen, business meeting updates, or the business meeting agenda for folks that want to join. And then we've got an update on a talk, a Zoom talk for folks that might be interested in that as well. Okay, so this time, if anyone would like to weigh in on anything, please feel free to, or you can put anything in the chat. And Loretta, am I missing anything?
No, I think you covered it well. And this, so like, we don't have specific, like we want to give space for folks to, if you came wanting to speak about anything, to go ahead and just let us know, to provide your comments. And we're looking forward to hearing from you guys if you have anything to add, or if you have any comments or concerns, questions at this point, feel free to unmute yourself.
And then there are two specific questions that I wanted to put out there, and I can put them in the chat for folks to think about. But would be helpful if people have ideas about either of these. And so one is, this has come up in the context of the Elder Subcommittee, but it's going to be applicable to all of the work really. And the question is whether all of the testimony that's submitted by individuals should be public, just as a matter of like, that's what this council was designed to do was create a, you know, a public-facing record of, you know, this history of genocide in California, and that it's important that folks that are submitting, that they're submitting with an understanding that this is for public review and just the public process, or whether there should be constraints on what is public and not public. And we've heard different thoughts, and I'm not going to speak for our council members who have had thoughts on this, but you know, one school of thought is that you know, this is kind of a difficult topic, and so not everybody who is sharing may want the things that they're sharing to be ascribed to them. There are also some legal issues if names are being named, and whether we need to be censoring that, for example, which I don't like the idea of censorship, but again, there's like liabilities and things like that where when names are being named. And then there's the other school of thought that, you know, this is the opportunity for Native peoples to tell the full story of their experience and their histories, in all of the complexity of that, and where things are difficult, where things feel shameful, where things feel complicated. That's all a part of this experience of being a Native person in California, and that shouldn't be hidden from view if we're going to be addressing all of it fully.
Thank you, Dwayne. Old Friendship House crew.
So folks can think about that. I'll put it in the chat. And just so everyone's aware, we are discussing with legal counsel, you know, what are the constraints on things that are shared, just so that we're prepared either way. You know, if it's going to all be public record, that makes things a little bit less complicated probably, but more complicated in the liability piece. So we're just kind of trying to figure out what the options are and make sure that everybody is aware.
We got a comment to asking about the recordings, and so I see Michael and myself just put in the chat the link to the October meeting on YouTube.
Okay, great. And we're working on getting some of the past meetings up that were available on CalSpan. Listening sessions are in the process of being uploaded now, so those should be up soon. And the others are streamed to YouTube concurrently as they're Zoom, as they're going out on Zoom. So if folks want to just watch on YouTube, they're able to do that as well. So you will have less ability to comment if you're watching on YouTube. Other questions, they can be outside, they can be just things like that as well. If folks have questions about where things are or process. Okay. One other thing too, before I get into some of these updates, is we're also, the subcommittees are also thinking about how they're going to do the work and how they're going to structure themselves. So we are looking for certain members of subcommittees. For example, the Elder Subcommittee is looking for a few regional members who would be elders. And so if you know anybody who would be a good pick, let us know and we can send that their way. There are also other subcommittees that are going to be more expertise and topically oriented. So for example, the Education Subcommittee is probably going to need more issue area experts than other committees might. And so if you have folks that are interested in thinking about both the status and needs of education in California Indian Country, but then also curriculum development in California, please send those our way too. Okay. Loretta, do you think I should share my screen or I should just update as we go? I'll share my screen.
And again, if anyone's interested in joining one of the subcommittees, feel free just to email us and let us know your interest. Especially I know education is looking for folks to join too.
Okay.
You're good.
Cool. So the Education Subcommittee was created, and I don't think it's yet met as a subcommittee. Basically, how we do this is each subcommittee has, it kind of runs itself. And so it depends on what the topic is for each subcommittee. And so some subcommittees run themselves like mini councils, and some subcommittees like education might be more of a community-oriented, open type of subcommittee. So the Education Subcommittee was created, as I mentioned, for the purpose of looking at the status and needs of education for California Indian Country. So that's one charge. And then the second charge is also looking at educating the general public on California Native peoples. And so that's the curriculum piece of it as well. So right now, I think they're still getting themselves organized, but I think this is one of the subcommittees where they'd actually like to have issue area experts. So if you're someone who's interested in those type of topics, please reach out to us and we can send you to the subcommittee for them to consider. Typically, how it would probably work is the subcommittee will have a slate of folks they want to add to the subcommittee as non-voting members of the council. They bring that to the full council, and then the full council would say, yep, we're good. They're now non-voting members of the council. Or a subcommittee could also have an advisory body that supports it. So there's a lot of ways of doing it. I think, again, each subcommittee figures out its own scope and its own charge. And so if you're interested, please feel free to reach out on this. Anything else, Loretta, on this piece? Nope. Okay.
I was struggling to find my mute button, but no, good.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the Deliverable Subcommittee, this was created because the council was concerned about making sure that it was tracking and also that there was an outcome of this process. So both tracking recommendations for things that could be done, and that also those things do get done as a result of this council's work. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be creating a kind of running database of all of the proposals that both the council but then the community want to see out of this process. And so some things could be, you know, a statewide curriculum that's in schools, something like that. And that could come out of the Education Subcommittee. So some of these deliverables will necessarily come out of those subcommittees. You know, other things could be, you know, a land transfer or land buyback fund for California Native American tribes, things like that. Those are just ideas. Those are not things that are in the tracker, but if you have those ideas and you want to send them to us, we can put them in the tracker. But that's what the Deliverables Committee will be working on, is similar to what was in the Truth and Reconciliation document that Loretta put in the chat, is making sure that there's like actual policy and legal and public charges, so that this does not just become something where we're examining what happened here without creating real solutions for people who are carrying that burden now. But that we're really saying, like, you know, this happened here, we all know it, no one can turn a blind eye now, and here's what the state and what the people who benefit from those acts that so deeply impacted our communities, this is what they can do to start making up for it in some way. So the Elder Subcommittee, we have the Elder Subcommittee is on right now. So if any of them would like to give an update, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. And I can just give a quick summary.
Yeah, I'd appreciate a summary, Christina.
Okay, great. So the Elder Subcommittee has met twice. That's right? Sorry, my brain stopped working somewhere back in 2020. So the Elder Subcommittee has met twice, and it's Councilmember Lucas and Councilmember Harper. And again, as I mentioned, they are seeking some regional diversity. And so they'd like to add some elders from other regions in the state to make sure that they are adequately considering those needs as well. But what they have thought about, and I think the major initiative out of the Elder Committee has been the charge to capture the first-person narratives and stories of elders throughout the state. And so where you have a tribe that has a handful of elders that have not told their stories, or have told their stories, but they're not a part of a statewide initiative, that the Elder Subcommittee wants to encourage them and urge them to tell those stories, you know, with, as I mentioned, all of the complexity, all of the experience, all of the different pieces that may not have ever been said to anybody before, and wants to make sure that that's captured sooner rather than later, given that elders, you know, are part of the aging population. We want to make sure that that is available for both their tribes, but also their descendants, and just the enormous value of that perspective of someone who has seen so much happen in such a short amount of time is just priceless for the community at large. And so that's one of the major charges. So we're looking for different elders groups throughout the state, and we know that there's a couple of tribes who have pretty ongoing healthy elders programs and elders community centers that we'll be tapping into to ask if they might be able to stand something up. And what we're looking at here, and again, we're looking at some of the legal issues to make sure that we're not putting people in weird situations or having few parameters on things, and then having certain families feel like they've been completely, you know, sideswiped by one elder's testimony, which, you know, would be kind of enjoyable, but probably we don't want to introduce that into the world. But really what we're looking at is standing up a model that is similar to what StoryCorps does, where there's locations where people can go and give their testimony. And this wouldn't just be to elders, but we'd focus on elders as kind of a primary and first population that we'd want to get on the sooner side. But where folks can go and submit their testimony and get recorded, or we could come out and record them ourselves, or conversely, we can have people have record themselves, and we'll just give them best practices and best lighting and the type of things that would be helpful in collecting these stories from elders. So that's a very basic overview of that piece. But really with the Elder Subcommittee, we also view it as a very critical advisory body in shaping how we should view this work and what we should be thinking about as we do it. Given that a lot of our elders have already been here, done that, and want to make sure that we do this right and that we're not doing something that is going in the wrong direction. So very much a guidance, an advisory type of body as well. So I'll pause there because I probably missed a few things. So if anybody wants to add anything, feel free to jump in. Councilmember Lucas?
Yeah, I number one, I want to thank you. I think you did a good overview on that. Just a couple things that I'd like to really add from a personal point of view is this is terribly important. You want to remember now, I'm 86 years old. So when you're that old, 100 years isn't that long ago. So my plea is to the community, and if you have anybody out there listening who has an elder, if you can make a personal plea with each and every one of them to write their own stories. I think there's been too much of our stories and our history written by anthropologists and ethnologists, and they tend to put the flavor of their own culture in there rather than to get to the substance of that personal interview. My concern is that these documents stay within the Indian community, but I think the information could be synthesized to correct the historic record of the California Indians collectively. More importantly, I think we owe this to the generation that is yet to be born yet. I think we're at that crucial point where if we don't tell our story, good, bad, and ugly, that we're doing ourselves and that younger generation a disservice. So I just wanted to throw that in there, and I'd ask Councilmember Harper if you have any more thoughts on that or would like to add to that. Thank you.
Yes, I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you both, and that was very well said. We may need you to say the same thing when you're full screen, and then we'll have it perfectly, but we do have you recorded with that sound bite. So I'm very pleased with because we've been wanting to get out to the community and make sure they understand the perspective that the Elder Subcommittee is really coming from and in asking for those stories. So very much appreciate it.
I don't know why, but I just really, really feel personal desire to see us come together collectively. I know some old folks have got secrets and they like to keep them because that makes them feel more important. Sometimes our egos get in the way. I want to get rid of all of that. I want that in your back pocket and sit on it. We all have a unique story. It's that unique story that I really want to see come to the record as honestly as we can make it. And the only people who can do that are the people who have lived it. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Very well said. I'll pause at this time if any of the community has anything that they'd like to say about the Elder Subcommittee or the work or any of this that would be helpful for the subcommittee to know at this time. And if anybody has any thoughts, you can also put in the chat. Okay. So the next subcommittee is the Funding Partnership Subcommittee. And so I gave a bit of an update on this last time, but what I'm going to do in the next meeting is go kind of through a slide deck that explains the whole relationship that we have with the Colonizing Wealth Project so that folks understand it. But really they're another tool in our toolbox to make this work more effective. And so, you know, really want to make sure that we are standing them up to be effective in the space that they're in and be able to get critical funding to the things that this council and the California Native American community thinks need to be funded. But also wanted to clarify a couple of things because I know some of the council members and some of the California Native community had some questions. And so really just wanted to explain a bit more about how they're going to be structured and how their fund is going to be structured. One of the pieces is that they're going to be setting up a community fund for California Native tribes and people to be able to engage in this work. And engage in this work is kind of a broad type of thing to say, but really what it means is, number one, if folks have ideas about how they might be able to best engage in this work, that's the funding subcommittee would like to hear that, because they'll be creating basically like a metric or like, you know, acceptable things to be funded, not acceptable things to be funded, and kind of the parameters of what that fund looks like. But it could be something where it's funding, you know, travel costs for people to engage in the work of the council, or it could be that it's funding a researcher for your own tribe to research all of the things that you want to submit into this council's work. Or it could be, you know, that it is funding, you know, a part-time person to interview all your elders and record it to submit to this work. So, you know, there's like kind of a lot of different things that it could be doing. You know, it could even be, you know, something where it is, you know, getting someone who is like a full-time cultural ambassador for your tribe or your tribal community to engage in this work, or to build out, for example, the landing page for the digital atlas for your tribe so that people can see who you are now. So, you know, there's kind of a lot of different things that it could do. I think the subcommittee is open to all of that, but how the fund will operate, Decolonizing Wealth Project is not run by a board of directors. It's basically an organization that operates different funds, and how those funds operate are through advisory councils, and those advisory councils are effectively the board of directors for each fund. So this fund would be operated by an advisory council of California Native peoples. It could be just the funding partnership subcommittee, or it could be additional people. Whenever there's decisions that need to be made about money, it's probably best to have fewer people, but also allow for some wiggle room for people to be able to recuse themselves if they have a conflicting interest, given that they may be from a tribe that's looking to compete for funds. But that is kind of what the structure is going to be as it stood up. So at this point in time, they're not quite sure the level of funding that will be in that community fund at this point, because they're still working with philanthropy to see, or to seed that fund. So it could be just a couple $100,000, it could be a lot more, but that will be the near-term fund. And then long-term, that partnership is looking to fund some of those deliverables. So for example, if the call to action is, you know, restore this many acres of ancestral Native lands to California Native American tribes by this date, then that could be one of the things that it funds is, you know, land purchase, land buyback, or even, you know, even just like the legal work that needs to get done for even no cost transfers. So, or like the legal work that needs to get done for no cost transfers, and then build out for, you know, any sort of other type of contingencies that need to be taken into account. So that's a lot of descriptors on something that is not quite there yet, but just so folks are kind of thinking about how this works. And that partnership can also serve as a pass-through for things that that this that the council or that the community wants to fund. So for example, let's say so-and-so Intertribal Foundation wants to do direct or wants to create a scholarship or have a direct funding to certain tribes. They can act as a pass-through for that. Well, they wouldn't have to if it was a tribal foundation. So we'll have to think about those details. But if there are things where there's research that's going to get funded rather than it going through state processes, which can take sometimes years, just frankly because of how things work here, it's very much seeking to be a revolving door for funding for things that the council and the community see as priorities for this work. So I'll pause there if folks have questions or want to chat on any of that. But I'll give some visuals on Friday so that people can see in a different way. And I think really the challenge here that we're trying to put to the community is already our partners within the governor's office who have been looking at creating more philanthropic support are hearing things like, oh, well, that was something that happened so long ago. It's not us. We're not a part of that, but they're based in California, for example. Or like they live in California and they have homes in ancestral territories on the beach. And so part of what we're hoping to accomplish with some of the bigger, oh, and I forgot to mention this, we'll also fund a documentary effort to document the work of the council and create also greater awareness of these type of mechanisms, but also specific to California and what the needs and experiences of California Native peoples have been. But really, it's also what I was going to say is that there's a lack of awareness about the universal accountability of people who live here, even if they aren't descendants of the perpetrators that did things here. So, if you buy from certain companies, those are companies that made all of their wealth during the gold rush from people who are doing this kind of thing. If you live in certain properties, most properties in California, you're in a place that was actually native land. So it's really that universal accountability that we're trying to create more awareness of, and that you can benefit from the acts of others or the awfulness of others without even knowing it, and that your ignorance is also a legacy of that, for example. So like, it wasn't just that Native people were cleared out from this place. It's that most people in California don't even realize that Native people are still here and that they're, part of the holistic California experiment. And that we are part of what makes this state great, and that it's also, so what I'm trying to say is that that's a legacy of genocide as well, is ignorance without understanding or making an effort to understand that people are still here. So I'll get off my soapbox now, and we'll move to the next one unless folks have questions here. Okay. So the Youth Council. So this, we don't have major updates yet because what we're doing right now is working with one of our contractors to put on a youth event that'll be virtual, but we'll bring in California Native influencers to convene the youth and kind of think through what they'd like to see from something like this, so that we're starting off from a perspective that really accounts for how youth want to be involved in this space. And it could be that youth want to do this in a completely different way. Like, we're all used to convening in certain ways that feel meaningful to us, but youth these days, I don't know if a lot of them even talk to each other in person. So there's like, you know, there may be even a technological way that they want to do this that's different from how we might do it and how we might feel comfortable. You know, maybe it is a Snapchat talking circle or some sort of, I sound so old right now, but really what we want to hear is what are, and Councilmember Lucas is probably laughing because I'm acting like an elder right now, but really what we want to hear is what's going to be meaningful to them, what's going to be useful to them, and what do they want to see out of something like this. And maybe it's that, you know, they don't want to look at it from the perspective that we've been looking at it, but maybe they want to look at it from how do they, you know, have their own, you know, stamp on this, on, you know, modern California, and how do they live fully in this space. So we really want to hear from them and what they want to do with this. Councilmember Lucas?
Yeah, number one, I don't see any gray hair in your head yet, so you've not joined me yet. I would like to comment on a personal experience I had Saturday, if I can do this, just to throw a seed out there, so to speak. I recognize we're all different generations, and each generation looks at their particular experience and journey in their life as very different from somebody like mine. And I think that has value to it. When I was having my truck serviced yesterday, I drive a Ford Ranger. It's a 2019 with a Mustang motor and entirely too hot for an 89-year-old woman. So I found out that Ford has come out with another little truck, more of the size of the old Ranger. I don't know if you're familiar with these or not, but some of the listeners might be. What I find really interesting was the salesman was telling me how that came about, because most people who have had Rangers, such as myself, I've always gotten over 300,000 miles on them. They're really a good truck, but this one is too big. It's not a great big hog, but it's too big. So Ford came out with another little truck that is the same style as the old Ranger, but it's a hybrid. And, you know, when you hit the brakes, that creates energy in the battery and all that. The style is very sleek. I kind of really liked it. He was telling me what Ford did was go to different high schools and pull out their high academic students that were interested in engineering, and set them down and said, okay, draw your dream card. Let's talk about this. And that's how they kind of evolved to these new, more dynamic vehicles that we're seeing coming out on the thing. So I'm saying that because the young generation that I get acquainted with every now and then in the work that I do is very technology orientated. And it'd be interesting to see them all sit down and brainstorm, so to speak. What would they like to see in the future for the collective Indian community in the state of California? So just to throw that out as a seed. So, okay, I'm finished.
Thank you, Councilmember. I love that. And I think what I'd like to see as they do that is to have engagement with also the seated council, but then also the Elder Subcommittee, because what I've heard anecdotally, which I think is just how Indian country works, is we work in anecdotes, and is that they're seeing a lot of this amazing like cultural renewal and revival with our youth, but then also kind of it's a bit like disengaged from like the elder and the generations that came before. And so I think I'd like to see spaces where all of that can come together, and that we can kind of create that relationship across generations, so that the elders can, as you just learned about the new truck from the youth, and they can learn about some of why we like trucks generally. So there's this like cross-pollination of values. Okay. So the next subcommittee, and members of the public and community members, if you'd like to weigh in on anything, please feel free to jump in. I'm just going to keep moving. The academic partnerships. And so they are finalizing their mission statement. And what they're going to do as a next step is convene the Native American academic community to understand a bit about where people might have strengths and where they might want to weigh in and partner on this, and then also understand what those needs for partnership might be. I think an example might be, there is a ton of primary source autobiographical language and recording materials at Berkeley, for example. And if there's a group there that would like to partner with this group to incorporate that into the record of this initiative, and then pull out specific instances that can be incorporated into any kind of living body of work. Like, so basically this initiative will have a report, but it will also hopefully be a living initiative where you can actually go online and hear from your elders and your ancestors about their first person experiences. And so, that can be one thing, and where it needs assistance of philanthropy or other funding, that could be identified. The other piece that the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee is looking at is that they're going to look at, and then also bring the full council with them, I think in March, if, again, COVID is less of an issue, but I'll knock on wood now. But they will be taking a trip to visit with the archives, who has some materials. They'll also be visiting with the state library, who has some materials. And then they'll also be visiting with state parks, who has some primary source materials as well within their collection. So we're planning on having that also be something that the full council does in March, to go see some of the things that are available here, just given there's a substantial collection in Sacramento itself. But then we'll be thinking about what's needed for all of that to be potentially all of what the full council wants to incorporate into the record to be digitized. And then the ideal would be to have, a fully searchable database so that anybody, could enter whatever keywords and find things pretty easily, rather than having to kind of know where things are hidden and then be digging through archives. So that's kind of an overview of where they are at, and that brings up one of the questions that they have, that the full council needs to consider as well, is what kind of materials should the council be incorporating into this record? And to be more precise, Professor Ben Madley's book, An American Genocide, incorporates primary source materials from the state perspective. And so it's pretty much the state, every instance where the state, during certain periods of time with certain historical and time constraints, took credit for the mass murder of Native people in the state. And so it's, newspaper clippings. A lot of those clippings are available in the digital atlas already. And then, it's also just receipts for things. There's also bounty lands that were given to different members of militia. And so is that something that the council should be incorporating into this record, or should it be focusing primarily on, primary source Native materials, so that it's adding to a narrative from a Native perspective? So that's not something that is probably going to be answered today, but just something for folks to think about. And Michael's put a link to the digital atlas in the chat for folks who might want to play around with that as well. We're hoping to have the digital atlas actually get built out in response to also this initiative. And we are getting to time, so if folks had something that they wanted to chat about, please feel free to jump in. We've also got a reminder in the chat to rock your mocks this week. So folks who have them, feel free to rock them. Okay. Status and identity. The major update here is that we are looking for people who can help moderate this subcommittee. And what we're looking for are people who have the ability to take really complex and complicated issues and turn them into actionable recommendations. And so I think in this space, really it would benefit from people who are, number one, familiar with the Native community, but then also familiar with the California Native community, because there's a lot here that will need to be adequately addressed, listened to, and taken seriously. But then also whoever we put in this space will likely need to have a bit of distance from the California Native community, given that it is so personal, some of these issues, but then also have the ability to communicate where there are actual constraints around what is able to be done. And so that's almost an impossible ask, but if folks know of people who have been effective in spaces like this, we would love to chat with them. And then just a couple of other updates. As I mentioned, beginning in March, we'll shift to the regular quarterly meeting schedule, but those likely won't be exclusive. As I mentioned, we may have also in between those quarterly meetings, hearings for maybe even, it may not even be the full council, but maybe even regional representatives to go up to their regions and do hearings in different sites. And then they'll take place, the regular meetings will be in the different regions over 2 days, with one day being a talking and healing circle and day 2 being a hearing style meeting. And then we'll want to think about programming around meetings. And what we thought about is really building out what people do when they're at those meetings. And so, as I mentioned, you know, there's a really large collection that Parks maintains in Sacramento of California Indian primary sources, artifacts, resources, and that's something that people may want to go see as part of this public awareness campaign, and then also self-awareness initiative. So there's things like that. There's, you know, Sutter's Fort. There's all sorts of things around Sacramento that people can visit to educate themselves, but can also create a bigger awareness of the California tribal community that continues to be. So there's the Maidu Museum, for example, up in Roseville. There's actual tribes that may want to open their doors as well. So if folks have ideas about what they'd like to do, we are all ears. And with that, we're still at about time, but I will stop my share and see if anyone has any further comments or anything they'd like to share with the group. Sorry, I'm answering something in the chat. You might be hearing me type very quickly.
Christina, did we mention the decolonizing wealth position? Okay.
Oh, not the position. That's a good point. Decolonizing Wealth is currently seeking a senior project manager to help from that side. And as I mentioned, again, they are not leading an initiative that is separate from this. They'll be helping organize the work that needs to get done on that end, but it'll still be, they contract with the Office of the Tribal Advisor to help give tools or create tools to for the council. So this person will need to be someone who can work together well with us, but also with the California Native community generally, and will have an understanding of that. And it could also be an organization, because really what Decolonizing Wealth Project is looking for is, some ability to work with the philanthropic community, but also some ability to be well organized in these grant making processes and help, kind of just facilitate all of that. So we know of a couple of California Native organizations that do this kind of work that we'll reach out to directly, but that is not preventing anyone else from doing that as well. So when you see a position, it could also be that, you may want to view it as also an RFP type of thing if you have a small group that might be willing to help with this work. This is a second but related position, but also Heritage Commission is now also hiring a legal analyst for their CalNAGPRA shop. So if you know anybody who might be interested in that, again, CalNAGPRA is the state repatriation law, and so would be helping with mounting kind of a major initiative for the Heritage Commission to make sure that all of the outstanding items that are still within state possession, which is state museum agencies, institutions, gets repatriated, hopefully quicker than it has been over the past couple of decades. So those opportunities are in the chat. If there's any final thoughts or feedback, feel free to jump in. And I did want to mention, because Madonna is on, we have chatted about creating a subcommittee or focus on the experience of Native Americans with disabilities in California. And so we'll be bringing that to the council. It's not, our chat was after our agenda was made for this one, but we will bring it up in the next council meeting in January likely. But we'll bring it up for folks to think about if you'd like to stand up that subcommittee as well. Anything else that I'm missing, Loretta?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Then I am going to ask if any council members have any final thoughts before we call it for today.
Yes, I just wanted to thank everyone for participating in this meeting and look forward to working with everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Sisk or Councilmember Lucas, any final thoughts?
I just wanted to comment on Councilwoman, your hair is getting a little more grayer. Anyway, thank you for your comments. So I'm not sure anybody appreciates my sense of humor, but I notice little things.
You've got a thumbs up, so it sounds like everyone appreciates it.
And again, we have, Councilmember Sisk, I see you've unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to encourage people to, really utilize the council and bring in those thoughts and questions and write them to the council if you need to. But we really need a lot of direction. This is a big state. We have a lot of different kinds of tribal entities and tribal groups, and not aware of everything, but now's the time, during this governor's session that we have this opportunity to bring these things forward so that it can be in the reports, so that, the next governor, or if he continues, that he'll gather that information, be able to maybe change things for us here. So I just wanted to encourage everybody who's calling in to share and to go on record here. Now's the time. Okay, thanks.
Wonderful comments. Thank you, Councilmember Sisk. And Loretta, you had a final comment.
My only final comment was just to remind folks about the evening listening session on Wednesday and then the council meeting on Friday. And Michael put the link to the blog in the chat.
And everything goes in the evening listening session. If folks want to join for dinner or happy hour, we do not judge. So feel free to join us on Wednesday night as well. Okay, well, with that, we'll call it. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon.